everybody, and welcome back to Trad Kids TV. I'm your host Rachel, and today we'll be talking all about why the Pope is in Rome. So let's get into it. Have you ever wondered why the Pope is in Rome? Honestly, I never really thought about it until somebody asked me recently, why is the Pope in Rome and not in the Holy Land of Israel? Well, the short answer is pretty easy. It's where St. Peter, the first Pope, died and was buried. And in case you were wondering about how St. Peter became the first Pope, let's review. Well, before he was called Peter, he was called Simon. When Jesus first met Peter, he was known as Simon, son of John. Simon was a fisherman, as likely his father was, and his father's father, and his father's father's fathers, and so on. So Simon's identity as a fisherman was closely tied to who his father was. When Jesus calls Peter to himself in John chapter 1, Jesus says, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas." In the other Gospels, we hear Jesus telling Peter after the miraculous catch of the fish that Jesus would make him a fisher of men. Peter was a fisher of fish. Jesus would make him a fisher of men, which is from Matthew 4:19. So his name change reflects a change in his identity and calling. So the name Peter literally means rock. In Latin Petra and in Greek Petros. The earliest translations of the New Testament were written in Greek and Latin. In Aramaic, the language Jesus likely spoke most often, the word Kepha is the equivalent of Peter and denotes a sizable rock, one suitable as a building foundation. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus gives the keys to the kingdom to Peter, promising to build upon Peter his church, and consume the gates even of hell would never triumph. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound to heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now, let's go back to Rome. Cool. Anyway, St. Peter was martyred in the mid-early 60s in Rome, crucified upside down in the Circus of Nero, then buried in the necropolis, the cemetery, just around the corner. His tomb quickly became a site of prayer and pilgrimage, and the mausoleum top of his grave was used as an altar for the Eucharist. A chapel was eventually built over it. 3 centuries later, the Grand Basilica of St. Peter was built over his tomb, with the main altar positioned directly over his tomb. Eventually, this was replaced by the new St. Peter Basilica in the 16th century. The main altar is still directly over St. Peter's tomb. Where was that tomb, and where was that necropolis? Well, it's on the Vatican Hill in Rome. So the Vatican in Rome was the burial place of St. Peter, the first pope. And the altar of the Basilica of St. Peter is on the bones of St. Peter. Okay, now it's time for a quick side note. A not so widely known detail of Catholic churches is the presence of saint relics inside the primary altar reserved for the sacrifice of the Mass. A relic can be any part of a deceased holy person's body or belongings that is kept as an object of reference. Thanks for joining us in our quick side note. Now let's get back to the show. So, to recap, St. Peter was the chief of the apostles, with a unique ministry as their head, confirming them in their faith. He died in Rome, and the popes of the church, also known as the bishops of Rome, are the successors to St. Peter. The church did not choose Rome. Christ chose Peter, and Peter founded the church in Rome and died there. So, the church is rooted where Peter is. It also makes sense that the church is originally centered in Rome, since Rome was the capital of the empire, and all roads lead to Rome. The Pope didn't always reside to Rome, though. In the late 13th century, a clash between the King of France and the Pope at that time, Boniface VIII, eventually led to a future Pope, Clement V, moving the papal residence from Rome to France in 1309. But thanks to the mystical vision and persistence of St. Catherine of Siena, the residence of the Pope was eventually moved back to Rome, nearly 70 years later, and has remained there ever since. Whew. And one more thing before we leave you. So technically, the Pope actually lives in the Vatican City, which is an independent state separate from Italy, and is considered the smallest country in the world. So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and feel free to drop us a line at tradkidstv@gmail.com if you have any other burning questions you'd like to help us explore. Thanks for watching, and Deo gratias. Bye! Altar of the... Whoa.